Story 1. In the remote mountains of China, nestled atop a steep cliff, stood an ancient monastery forgotten for centuries. Its imposing architecture and towering spires seemed to silently watch over the mysteries buried within its stone walls. A group of brave adventurers decided to venture into this monastery in search of ancient treasures and lost secrets. Among them were Li, a renowned archaeologist, Zhang, an experienced monk, and Mei, a fearless adventurer. Armed with lanterns and torches, they crossed the monastery's gates with a certain apprehension. As they entered the main hall, an oppressive sensation overtook them. The air was thick with an aura of mystery and danger, and every step echoed ominously in the sepulchral silence of the monastery. Ignoring their concerns, the group began to explore the vast halls and dark corridors of the monastery. They discovered ancient frescoes and enigmatic sculptures that seemed to tell long-forgotten stories. As they ventured deeper into the monastery, strange phenomena began to occur. Shadows seemed to dance along the walls, voices whispered in the darkness, and cold drafts swept through the corridors. Zhang, the monk, shuddered as he felt a malevolent presence lurking in the shadows. He warned his companions to stay on their guard, but they continued their exploration with reckless determination. As they delved deeper into the depths of the monastery, they came across a locked door that seemed to lead to a part of the monastery once forbidden to visitors. Intrigued, they decided to open it, ignoring the silent warnings that seemed to scream at them to turn back. Inside, they discovered a sacred chamber adorned with ancient statues and relics. But at the center of the room stood a dark and sinister altar, upon which rested an ancient book covered in strange runes and mysterious symbols. Intrigued by this discovery, the adventurers approached the altar and examined the book with curiosity. But as soon as they touched it, an invisible force seemed to seize them, plunging them into a whirlwind of darkness and madness. When they regained consciousness, they found themselves in another dimension, trapped in a nightmarish world where the laws of reality seemed to have lost all meaning. Grotesque creatures lurked in the shadows, and inhuman whispers echoed in the fetid air. Terrified but determined to find a way to escape, the adventurers set out in search of an exit, facing terrifying trials and deadly dangers at every turn. Finally, after hours of desperate wandering, they discovered a mysterious portal that seemed to lead out of this infernal world. Without hesitation, they rushed through the portal, leaving behind the horrors of the cursed monastery. When they emerged on the other side, they found themselves back in the real world, exhausted but relieved to have escaped their nightmare. But even after returning home, they could never forget the horrors they had experienced in the Monastery of Shadows. Story 2. In the remote mountains of Shanxi Province in China stood a millennia-old monastery known as the Temple of Eternal Spirits. Perched atop a steep hill and surrounded by dense forest, the monastery seemed to silently watch over the ancient secrets buried within its stone walls. A group of courageous adventurers, drawn by tales of hidden treasures and forgotten mysteries, decided to venture into the Temple of Eternal Spirits. Among them were Mei, a fearless explorer, Liu, a passionate historian, and Chen, a local guide who grew up near the monastery. Armed with lanterns and torches, the group embarked on the perilous ascent of the steep hill to the monastery. The air was heavy with mystery and an oppressive atmosphere, and every step seemed to echo in the sepulchral silence of the forest. When they finally reached the monastery gates, a sense of unease came over them. The doors were adorned with ancient sculptures depicting forgotten deities and terrifying demons, and a sinister aura seemed to emanate from the stone walls. Ignoring their concerns, the group pushed open the monastery gates and entered the main hall. The interior was dark and gloomy, illuminated only by the flickering light of their torches, and every corner seemed to harbor dark secrets. As they explored the halls and corridors of the monastery, strange phenomena began to occur. Moving shadows seemed to glide along the walls, voices whispered in the darkness, and cold drafts swept through the corridors. Liu, the historian, shuddered as he felt an invisible presence watching them from the shadows. He warned his companions to stay on their guard, but they continued their exploration with stubborn determination. As they ventured deeper into the monastery, they discovered a secret chamber hidden behind a stone wall. Inside, ancient statues and mysterious frescoes told long-forgotten stories. Suddenly, May let out a cry of terror upon discovering a sinister inscription carved into the floor of the chamber. It was a warning, written in a forgotten language, predicting a terrible curse for those who dared disturb the rest of the ancients. Too late to turn back, the group decided to press on with their exploration despite the warnings. But the deeper they delved into the depths of the monastery, the more intense the strange phenomena became. Terrifying illusions assailed them, distorting reality and sowing confusion among the adventurers. Footsteps echoed in the darkness, but no one seemed to be there when the group turned to look. When they finally reached the inner sanctuary of the monastery, they discovered the unspeakable horror that awaited them. Ancient monks, transformed into hideous creatures by dark and forbidden magic, attacked them mercilessly. In the ensuing battle, Liu was gravely injured, and Chen mysteriously disappeared into the darkness. Mei fought for her life against the corrupted monks, but she quickly found herself overwhelmed by the number and power of her enemies. Just as she was about to be overwhelmed, a glimmer of hope appeared in the darkness. Chen reappeared suddenly, carrying an ancient relic capable of repelling the evil forces that haunted the monastery. With Chen's help and the ancient relic, Mei managed to defeat the corrupted monks and escape from the cursed monastery. But even after returning home, she could never forget the horrors she had experienced in the Temple of Eternal Spirits. Story 3. In an isolated valley of Yunnan province in China stood an ancient monastery known as the Temple of Lost Souls. The building, dating back several centuries, was surrounded by an aura of mystery and superstition, and the inhabitants of nearby villages carefully avoided approaching it, fearing the legends that surrounded the place. One day, a group of intrepid travelers, drawn by the promise of adventure and discovery, set out to explore the depths of the Temple of Lost Souls. Among them were Mei, a young and passionate archaeologist, and her determined companions. They crossed the monastery gates with a mixture of fascination and apprehension, ignoring the warnings of the elders who told tales of curse and desolation. Inside, the atmosphere was imbued with a gloomy tranquility, and the dark corridors seemed to echo with muffled whispers. As they explored the vast halls and winding passages of the monastery, they discovered strange and ominous signs of ancient presences. Broken statues littered the floor, their faces frozen in expressions of eternal terror, and mysterious inscriptions adorned the walls, written in an unknown language. Suddenly, Mei and her companions were enveloped by a thick fog that seemed to emerge out of nowhere. Visibility was reduced to nothing, and they found themselves disoriented and lost in the labyrinth of the monastery. Strange whispers echoed in the air, and shifting shadows seemed to follow them with every step. As they tried to find their way through the dark maze, they heard a piercing scream tear through the silence of the night. Trembling with fear, they rushed in the direction of the sound, hoping to find an escape from their nightmare. They finally emerged into a vast chamber, its walls adorned with frescoes depicting scenes of carnage and desolation. At the center of the room stood an ancient altar covered with mystical symbols and macabre offerings. Suddenly, a malevolent presence seemed to engulf them, and they were assailed by terrifying visions and nightmarish hallucinations. They realized with horror that the monastery was the scene of dark rituals and forbidden practices, and that they were trapped in its sinister clutches. As terror enveloped them, Mei and her companions understood that to survive, they would have to confront the ancient secrets of the Temple of Lost Souls and escape its deadly grasp before it was too late.